Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. made an appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast on Friday and confronted Rogan's concerns about how the Trump administration has handled immigration enforcement.
Rogan endorsed Trump in 2024, but has spoken out multiple times in the past year against some of the tactics used by ICE. On the podcast, Kennedy suggested that what Trump has done with deportations isn't actually much different from what President Obama did.
When they go looking for an immigrant, they're not just randomly searching, restaurants. They're going after particular people who they've gotten their names from local law enforcement and from others. During the during the Obama administration, President Obama deported more people than President Trump did, the most in history. Nobody cared.
Rogan seemed to agree with Kennedy's assessment, but he still expressed concerns that ICE has spent too much time and effort going after the wrong people. Let's take a look.
I know you're saying that they're targeting specific people. They're going after bad people, but also they're showing up at Home Depot and just grabbing people too and trying to find out if someone is a bad guy or a good guy. So there's probably a lot of people that are just people that got duped into coming to this country thinking they're going to be welcomed, and then they come over here and they're trying to get jobs, and now they're getting arrested and deported.
On another note, the two also discussed President Trump's recent executive order aiming to give a boost to the controversial herbicide called glyphosate. Glyphosate? Do you know how to say that?
Sounds good to me.
Trump's order seeks to ensure the country has an adequate supply of glyphosate-based herbicides, which are commonly used as weed killers in the agricultural industry, but the use of it has drawn scrutiny from some environmental groups and health advocates, including the Make America Healthy movement. Again, Kennedy previously voiced concerns about this drug, saying it's linked to all kinds of diseases, so he surprised many when he wrote on X last week, "I support President Trump's order to bring agricultural chemical production to the United States and end our near total reliance on adversarial nations."
But when he went on Rogan's podcast, he seemed a bit more hesitant. Let's watch.
It's not a good thing to have in your food. So it's not something that I was particularly happy with. Let me put it that way mildly. But I also understand the president's point of view. The president didn't create the system. He's dealing with a problem that was created long before, over the past 60 years.
Glyphosate. That's what it is.
You got it.
Sorry about that.
Look, I don't have to be critical of every single thing that RFK does. I'm critical of some of the things he does around vaccines, but getting bad things out of our foods, it should be always a noble mission for him. I'm more interested in the conversation that they had about immigration, because Joe Rogan has been adamant, and he also was a supporter of President Trump. Because I think what he's talking about, and what RFK is perhaps not his job to answer to, but is the policies of the administration. A story that stuck out to me recently was in Georgia. There was a school teacher that was killed. A lot of people weren't talking about it in the same way that we were talking about Renee Good or Alex Preddy, because it wasn't any interaction with law enforcement. It was actually a migrant that they were doing a high-speed car chase within 0.5 miles of a school in Georgia, a state that largely cooperates, according to your standards, with immigration policies of the administration. They decided to chase the guy around instead of taking his license plate, and he ended up smacking into a school teacher and killing her half a mile from a school. So the question is about immigration policies and if they're really doing the right things. And of course, this guy Oscar Lopez, I believe, he's in jail, and he is in a lot of trouble and hopefully going to get deported and get the book thrown at him. He killed this teacher. It's his fault. But the idea that he's being chased around the city by immigration officers, is that the best tactic in order to deport migrants? I don't know, especially when you think about the vicinity, like take the license plate, catch him later. This woman died, a beloved school teacher in Georgia. And I think that was a story that stuck out to me, that's outside of the conversation, but also inside of it, because it's the overall tactics idea. And we just talked about how some of the policies, because of that whistleblower last week, may have changed about how much training these officers are getting and how much they are, understand about what is appropriate and when, because of the administration trying to be rapid instead of being efficient, the whistleblower saying. So I just think that Joe Rogan still should stand firm in his perspective that, is this how we wanted to enforce immigration?
Yes, that is not how we want to enforce immigration, but to RFK Jr.'s point, it was not controversial when Obama carried out the most deportations in history, because he had the participation of the states, of the officials. Trump is dealing with local officials who are hostile to the exact same agenda of deporting illegal aliens. And so they've gone in and they've done some, and RFK Jr. is right, and I don't agree with it either, that, just camping out at Home Depot parking lots and seeing who's working there is the approach favored by Stephen Miller, for example, that I don't think is a good approach. What Tom Homan wants to do is coordinate with local law enforcement to catch an unprecedented number of illegals who have committed crimes and get them out of this country. But we can only do that in red states, because in blue states they don't want to do any sort of enforcement whatsoever, which is exactly what's happened in Minneapolis, which you and I come back to time and time again. So if the order of the day is resist, fight, don't help, don't turn over that information about criminals, illegal aliens, so that the government can go arrest those specific people, then you're going to get these kinds of just general scrutinizing of everybody in the parking lot. If we can't do the targeted enforcement if we don't have the help and the assistance of the local police.
Well, Tom Homan and Tim Walz have failed to explain to us what changed. Tim Walz says the policy remains largely exactly the same as it was prior to thousands of migrants descending upon Minnesota. And Tom Homan says we have come to some vague agreement.
Mayor in line.
We come to some vague agreement, and now we're pulling these ICE officers out. So because the American public is confused about what changed since Walz laid out almost specifically what policies his local law enforcement was already abiding by, what policies prison systems within Minnesota were already abiding by. I'd like to hear from Tom Homan about what exactly changed that made you so confident that Minnesota is not a place where you need to have thousands of ICE officers, because from what I understand, at least if I'm taking Tim Walz's word for it, nothing changed. Mm-hmm. So I just don't see how. I'm going to say, and I'm not talking about Fry, because I know I have said on the show, Fry is doing a lot to me in this moment of high tension to add to it. You're doing a lot the same way the president is doing a lot. So I think the fact that Homan came and is having communications with Walz and they decided to de-escalate, what changed? We still haven't had clarity on that, and that's the biggest issue.
Yeah. And it goes to show you that there is a danger in losing the Joe Rogan type voter, who's an important part of the swing voters who've entered the Trump camp. And so, this is the second time he brought this up with Rand Paul as well when Rand was on the show. Mostly to talk about COVID stuff, but Joe Rogan brought it up that he didn't like some of the immigration enforcement he's seeing. Rand basically agreed with him on most of that. RFK Jr. here was, trying to defend the administration's position. I thought he was doing a fine job, but it does go to show you that this policy is a bit is dividing the camp a little bit, and I think that's going to be a bad thing.
And a lot of people who the stories, just basing off the stories we're talking about today within MAGA, I guess, and you can probably answer this better than from my purview. What I'm seeing is like there are some divides over what the party looks like after Trump. A lot of people were aligning with Trump's campaign, but he's departed from a lot of that. And then also the idea that we're engaging with other countries in ways that no one who was supporting America First thought we would. Mm-hmm. And then also with migrants in a way that people don't support, but they do support immigration. Like, where does that voter land? And that's why I think a lot of Democrats are pushing for somebody who's more moderate, because maybe they have a chance to actually have conversation with those swing voters and not say, hey, I'm going to do the same thing that President Biden's administration did, which a lot of people thought around immigration was nothing.
A lot more to talk about on Rising. Please stay with us.